everyone. This is Scott, and welcome to this episode of The Union. This episode's a little bit different, but just as impactful. I recently got to ask risk management experts Sam Abadir and Jason Eubanks about the Shared Assessment Summit. They shared some interesting conversations they had while they were out there, questions that risk management professionals kept bringing up about AI and automation, and they provide some easy steps you can take to speed things up. So if you spend way too much time on mind-numbing risk management tasks, they detail how you can get your time back so you can focus on more important things. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I know you will too. So with that, here is Sam and Jason. Sam, as part of the prep of this session, you were telling me some of the comments that people had. You told people that, hey, I could save you 80% of your time to answer assessments or fill out SIGs. And people just they didn't believe you, right? So they wanted to see, like, how is it actually possible? What were some of the comments around that?
Yeah, they were in a couple of different buckets, right? First, they just didn't even believe it. They've used some of the desktop chat, OpenAI, chatbot, Copilot type tools, and they can't figure out how to plug the assessment actually into that tool. So, they're like, no, you can't do that, or you have to do it one by one. And then they didn't, and if they did believe it, they often didn't think that we could do it accurately, safely, without the hallucinations. So those were kind of the two first things. There was a real interesting reaction to a lot of folks, right? Which was, they came back the next day with their buddies, right? They're like, you got to see this. Because day one, they went in with skepticism. We showed them exactly what was going on. We talked about how it actually works. Day two is like, they're believers and they're bringing their buddies by to take a look. So it was really, really neat. It was kind of exciting.
Yeah, that's super cool. I love it when you see something that's just unbelievable. I see stuff all the time. I was actually playing with a content generation tool this morning and, read a tip and I was like, if I hadn't done it myself, I wouldn't have believed it. So I'm glad people had that same feeling of, okay, these guys really understand my problem. And you guys are from the industry, so that makes sense, right? You carry a sense of credibility around risk management. So Jason, I'm curious, I think you've been to this summit several times. You've been in and around this space. What was the most interesting conversation that you had at the summit, and what was it about? And maybe what did this person want to understand? And I don't want you to name who the person is, but like anonymously, like what did they want to know?
Yeah, well, first of all, it was just great to be back in person at the summit. I think Sam and I both were at the very last one before COVID, so 2019. So to see some of the familiar faces and also just learn about where they're currently at, if they're at the same company and how they progressed in their risk management and third-party risk management journey, as well as if they're on a new endeavor and, similarities from previous companies that we might have worked with them in the past. So it was amazing being there, seeing familiar faces and just connecting back with the folks and just being around risk experts. As we all understand in the industry, there's a lot of common themes. So sharing that intel and those just tips and tricks, and also just from a tooling perspective of what can help, was amazing to be back there. And, just form new relationship as well. But overall, from a direct kind of what's the conversation that sticks in my mind the most, kind of taking back to the high level of, where do we get started in AI? I think most people understand that AI can help their teams, whether they have an existing tool in place, whether that be a third-party risk management solution, a cyber risk rating solution, or an overall GRC IRM solution, but also, where can AI and other types of automation really help my team members that are still doing manual tasks? So I had a very interesting conversation. I think they came, to Sam's point earlier, they came a couple of times as a very large insurance company. And they came, the second time they came, it was during more of a dead period when I think there were some sessions going on. And one of the things was, hey, like, we're just trying to understand fully what types of AI can be applied within the Krista platform to help solve their current pain points. But also the main point was, where do we get started? And that was a very common theme within a lot of the conversations we have. Where do we get started? I think everyone really understands that AI can help, but just that first level of type of use case can be the hardest. So laying out a blueprint of what is possible and then kind of mapping that back to their specific pain points was a hot topic within that specific conversation.
Well, I didn't realize that the previous conference was in 2019. So, 5 years ago, that's a career for some people, right? I can't imagine the level of change that people realized when they came back, right? Like there was no AI talk, and now it's like all AI talk. So that would be a super big leap. So, Sam, same question to you. What was the most interesting conversation you had at the summit? Where were they in the mindset, and what were they trying to learn?
Yeah, I'm going to follow in Jason's footsteps for a second, because I do want to give a little bit of history. Jason said that we've been there a number of years ago. I don't remember Jason saying that we were actually there as a different company. Jason and I both worked for a different company, and frankly, that's the reason where I am today right now. So we both worked for a GRC company. We made a really high quality, GRC tool that really helped people manage governance, risk, and compliance. The problem with every GRC tool almost is that you have lots of data to get into the GRC tool, and a lot of people don't want to spend all the time that it takes to do that. The SIG is a fantastic assessment, so comprehensive, in the way that they've tailored it to allow you to tailor it to your own needs is actually great. But sometimes those SIGs are really long, and vendors don't want to answer them. They just give you all their documentation. When I was approached to come here to Krista, that was the very first thing I had in my mind. Can I take a giant pile of documentation and answer the SIG? And then can I put that actually into any GRC tool? And that was when I said, okay, great, I want to come on board. And this is, one of the very first things that I want to do. So did that, right? And it's kind of been one of the core pieces. I mean, it shows so well, it gets a lot of people interested. But back to that conversation question that you just asked, Scott, even at our booth, we had the SIG running, right? We had Krista answering the SIG, and you could see the questions being live, with any documentation that you wanted to feed into it. It would read it and then answer the questions. And that was super cool. And a lot of people thought that we were a SIG answering tool. We're not realizing that is just one capability of an orchestration platform that's powered by AI. And when we quickly got to that, that's when people said, you mean I can keep all my tools and answer the SIG? And I said, yeah. And they're like, well, can we do other things? I'm like, yeah, let's hear. And instead of saying, we can do this and this and this, I said, what's your most time-consuming piece? And this one lady had if I remember right, she had just recently taken over risk management, and she had found a couple of processes that she really didn't like, and the way that they were operating today. And one of them was around know your customer. And she wanted to really change that. But changing that, I don't think she realized it. Changing that meant that she now had, I forgot if she said 1,000 or 2,000 customers that she had to or vendors that she had to go all the way back through and do the KYC validations. And each one was going to take about 8 hours. And that was going to take, I think, 8 or 10 checks on each one of theirs for their KYC process. And it was really a great conversation. It was really great seeing that person get super, super excited, because the same tool that's helping her answer the SIG can actually orchestrate the process over KYC. And I mean, I think that she didn't know how she was going to get it done, because she only has one person working for her in that area. And just like almost everybody else, they're understaffed, they don't have enough budget, and they really saw this. They finally saw how AI, not just ChatGPT or any of the, or any of the GPT type things, can do something at a little task level. She saw the light of how it can actually solve the entire problem and really make her organization bring the better risk awareness that it can do. That was actually really exciting for me.
Yeah, I can imagine if it takes 8 hours to do one of those times 1,000.
There's only 2,000 hours a year.
Like, that one person's going to be
years
busy
of
for
work.
4 years. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think
along those lines, the complementary solution play was a key point there. As whatever solutions that they were using internal, whether that be a GRC or third-party risk management solution, there still is a gap. For that use case that Sam just mentioned, you have to throw a human on that to do that type of assessment. So that's where Krista can fit in perfectly and push the results to an existing GRC or IRM or TPRM solution, or to a ticketing solution as well. So that ability to play with the current solutions was a huge differentiation point for our position at the summit versus some of the other vendors that were there.
Yeah, I think the software industry itself, right? It solves problems that are this big, right? And so people buy problems, for this, and they don't realize that stringing them together is the that's the bigger problem, right? Like making one task go faster is great, but making the entire process to go faster and, gather more data and use AI inside that process is much more valuable. So what are, Sam, I'll kick it back to you. What are some of the other themes that, you talked about? That was the most interesting conversation. Mm-hmm. Did you notice any lowest common denominators amongst the conversations? Like what were people interested in other than, I would assume, like Jason said, how do I get started with AI? Where do I go? Is there anything else that you kind of came away with? We're like, wow, a lot of people asked about this, or a lot of people asked about that. Anything top of mind?
Yeah. We had this banner up behind us, right? And, I said that we could do internal audit, and we could do assessments, and we could do contract risk. And that contract risk is a big blind spot it seems like, to almost every single risk management program that we were talking to, because you have tools for assessments and you have other things like that, but your risk manager is often cut out of the risk management process of the contract approval and things like that goes to the attorney, who looks at the risk from a different type of way. Or a lot of times, maybe just the business signs on the contract and the attorney isn't looking at this, and they just don't know what they've signed up to. They don't know what they're contractually obligated to. And, unlike something like a SIG or an ISO 27001 statement of applicability, there's no standard format to a contract. Right? I mean, if you're using your own, great, but you're going to have a blend of all sorts of things. When they realized that we could basically take a contract and look at it like a customer attestation packet or something like that, and then look at my own set of controls and compare those to the contract to identify where things are the things in the contract we already do, things in the contract that we don't do, or things in the contract that we do differently, such as, the length of your background check, for example, 7 years, 5 years, 10 years, right? If one says 7 and one says 5, and you're doing the shorter one, you might be in a problem at some point if a problem actually arises. When they realized that Krista could be done with it, could do this too, that helped them see closing a giant hole that they all know was there in their risk management program, or at least many of them really knew that it was there. And they have no idea how to attack it because, again, they don't have hundreds of people to go through all these. They already have a reputation of being the group that slows things down or says no. And risk managers want to say yes. They want to find the most creative way possible to say yes, but to manage the risk to the business. But, these things get stuck in queue because it takes so long to review. They're really seeing their ability to expand their footprint and shorten the time of everything that it takes as being a big winner for their organization. And I think that was kind of the lowest common denominator, if you wanted to call it, or the most common framework, or the most common improvement to their framework. Jason, what do you think?
Yeah, I want to chime in on the first point that you made with regards to contract risk management, but also connect that to a session that I was fortunate enough to sit in on. So a gentleman and a friend, again, going back to the relationships built from 4, 5, 6 years ago, was speaking. He's actually at a new company than when I last saw him, but he's at a blockchain related company. And, they were speaking on the panel about the idea of your vendors, or the nth party risk management. So the idea of, it's not just your vendors, it's not just your fourth parties anymore. It's it keeps going on that chain. And that goes back to Sam's point about contract risk management. How do you really know your contractual obligations within all of these vendors, and their third and fourth parties from there? What's a quick way to pull that out? How can we use advanced tooling like Krista to pull that information out, so then we can start to map those against our existing risk management and third-party risk management program? So it's connecting that contractual risk management, use case, if you will, but from the business needs perspective of understanding that chain of vendors. And then they were also applying that to your clients, from a contractual obligation from your client's perspective as well. How do we start to apply tooling, but also just a framework of how do we know, like, are we actually mapping what we're committing to from a client's perspective? That's another primary use case that the AI and Krista can start to be applied to. Those are kind of my key points. Sam, you mentioned the friction in the business. That was your secondary point there. Again, they're the risk managers, the second line, the third party risk management teams are asking to do more, and they're just trying to increase the risk awareness of the business. And that means maybe more assessments. That might mean assessing the vendors, and that means collecting more documentation. So again, how do we start to use tooling to reduce that burden and that friction between the first, the second line, and the third line, or the second and the third line, and the business itself? And that's where some advanced automation can start to come into play. So you don't have to make that direct request. Maybe we just have continuous monitoring, or we have the AI pull out relevant documentation.
I think a lot of people really had a light bulb, Jason, to follow on to that friction piece, right? They really had a light bulb go off when they realized, you know what? I don't necessarily have to ask my vendor to fill out the SIG anymore. I just have to ask them for the documentation that they were going to send. And you let Krista do it, and then you can send it back to them if you wanted to, just as a favor, right? But, or for them to validate and do anything. But you have really improved the relationship between the risk manager and the third party, as well as the risk manager and the business who is asking to use the third party. It's that greasing of the wheel, or removing of the friction, is real. So it really does have an impact.
Is that I filled out RFPs. It's about the closest thing that I've done, but related to this documentation and putting from one to the other, is the friction and maybe the relationship, is that really that big a deal? I mean, are
Yes.
people mad at each other for not doing this, or?
It's not, well, I mean, sometimes you can get mad because you toss this thing over the wall and you say, can you get it back to me this week? But really, the relationship that you want to have with your vendor is a different one, right? You want to be able to call them and collaborate with them and do the things you need. And, if you need a favor, if you need a solid from somebody, hey, can you get this done faster? Can we do this a little faster? Or can you put a rush on this? If every call to them before that is, did you get my thing done? Did you get my thing done? Did you get my thing done? And they're like, no, because it's honestly like 40 hours of work, 50 hours of work. And by the way, you're not the only person asking them for that, right? They probably have dozens and dozens of customers who are asking them to complete those same types of assessments. So when you can just build it into a collaborative relationship where you're really talking about solving the problems for your customer, which an extension is their customer too, right? Then that's great. Everybody gets excited being able to help their customers. Nobody gets excited having to fill out spreadsheets.
No.
Yeah, and anyone with an auditing background who's requested evidence and documentation and continually has to ping on the business when things aren't given, any tools or automated ways to alleviate that, it will absolutely help that friction between the business and then the second line and third line. It's not that the third-party teams don't understand that the business has day jobs and they have other things that they need to get done. It's just they're also trying to complete their job. So how do we apply these tooling to pull out the data automatically, or again, just point it to a repository where the evidence is, for example, for something like a third-party assessment, and then you just have to follow up when things are not in place or exceptions or nonconformities are identified.
I've been on both sides. it makes everybody happy.
Yeah. Yeah. The documentation already exists. So we just need to get it from one place to the other, right? So Sam, you participated in a panel, I think, on the first day of the summit, right?
I did.
AI policies and best practices. What did you and the other AI experts talk about in the panel? What were some of the questions from the audience maybe that were interesting? Like, did you guys go off topic, or did you stay on, policies and best practices? What happened?
Well, best practice is quite encompassing. So I guess we stayed on topic, but a lot of the questions and things like that were really surrounding like the model risk and the usage of the models and things like that. Where is the data trained from? How are you ensuring that the right coefficients, in the models are actually there? Is the model itself valid? And a lot of people talked about actually treating a model as a third party, right? Are you doing your assessment?
And so you're talking about models. Are these like custom machine learning models? Are they
You're right.
LLM?
AI models, custom machine learning models,
Anything? Okay.
yeah, kind of that big bucket of AI, right? Because that big bucket of AI is it's basically a math problem, right? I'm going to make a prediction about the inputs that I actually put into the model itself. So how am I making that prediction? What is it that I'm doing to ensure that I'm going to get the best answer that doesn't provide bias or anything like that? And then what's the governance that actually goes around this? Now, it's really interesting. If you're into that level of AI and building those types of models, Krista is actually a really fantastic platform for managing everything around it, because eventually when you make the model, you actually have to put it into a process. So Krista is the best tool to actually put something into a process and manage it, and then understand who's using it, what data is being allowed to be put into the model, how are you preventing that model from, or the data from being exposed to the rest of the world and the rest of the internet to train other models, all sorts of things like that. Additionally, we talked about people using data to validate other things, right? Like, hey, let me put a piece of code in here and see if I can write it better, or let me put my policy in here and see if I can, get the policy to be more comprehensive or get that to be better. Not understanding the risks of what happens when you actually do that, especially with one of the free models. Are you by accident pulling in copyrighted code that somebody who wasn't as careful actually put out there? There's a lot of different risks to that, which the people who came up to me after the panel, we got to talk about how Krista works and protects that, which made even more light bulbs go off. So.
Yes, Sam, to the point with regards, I did not participate in the panel, but I was fortunate to hear just the end of it. And then a lot of folks come in to Sam afterwards to ask questions and just really understand, again, how are we making it real? But a lot of what I was hearing was around just the trust of the AI in general.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of folks come from different auditing backgrounds, and everyone's familiar with professional skepticism. And I think that's how that whole room operates, if you will. So once you start to introduce advanced automation and different technologies, there should be that level of professional skepticism applied. But that's where, the different tooling, including Krista, is transparency is key. Meaning, apply confidence scores, apply accuracy scores, cite where the information came from. For example, if you're pulling a specific answer from a policy or procedure, let's cite exactly where that came from. And those are some prime examples of how Krista starts to implement some best practices around transparency. To get over that concern with the business accepting, can we really trust the AI?
Transparency, security, explainability, all key topics.
Yeah. So the trust thing always gets people, right? Because if you don't use it and you haven't been a practitioner yet, obviously you're going to be skeptic. So that's super, super important, especially like, to me, these would be the most risk averse people in the company, right? They're risk management. So that totally makes sense that they would talk about that. As the conversations went on, and then after the session, kind of go back to what Jason was talking about earlier. It's like, how do I get started? Like, what were you telling people, like, based on their question? Like, did you tell them just to throw everything on the internet and get going, or like just copy paste here? Obviously that wouldn't work, right? Because you don't know where that's going. But like, what seemed to resonate with the people when said, okay, what do I do next, or how do I move forward, or maybe what do I go read? What do I research? Like, what resonated?
Yeah, Sam, let me take that first, and then you can apply some more theory on it. I just want to take you down to the boost level. I would literally just ask them, what are some of the common pain points that you have? What are some of the most tedious tasks that your humans, your staff, are still doing, even if you are using existing tooling, going back to a previous point. And that's where the opportunities would come around. And usually, we could bucket those into some of what we call our seed use cases, which are essentially blueprints to success around wrapping the different automation capabilities within Krista into, those blueprints use cases, if you will. But just asking them where their humans are spending, their most amount of time, that's where you started to really understand, okay, that's where automation can start to be applied. Going back to some specific use cases, if you will, that those could be bucketed in: assessments. Everyone knows we're talking about the SIG. We're talking about different type of assessments, fourth party contractual type assessments. That is still a huge, manual task within the organization. Again, those results can be aggregated and findings can be sent back to the GRC or TPRM solution. But the task of going in and answering questions is still a huge heavy burden on the human itself. So I like just to start the conversation there, and then we would start going into some additional use cases of, okay, well, if how we orchestrate a process, and that's another prime example of a Krista use case as well.
I couldn't agree with you more, Jason. I probably asked the question a little bit differently, right? When people ask me where to start, I say, look at it a couple different ways. Where if you could add more people to your company, where would you add them first? And another thing I would say is there something that you just do over and over and over and over and over and over and over again? And then the other question I'll ask is, what do people have trouble doing, right? And when I say people have trouble doing, right, what is it that they have trouble doing with the software that they have today? One of the most common areas right there, especially for the risk professional that I heard over and over and over again, is just identifying issues, right? That's such a important thing to do, whether it's in third party or any other part of the organization, is identifying issues. And I'll even challenge my own colleagues with that, my own friends with that. If you see something, you're supposed to say something, but who do you say it to? Where do you say it, right? Oh, I'm supposed to go over here and log in to this system that I never log into and create a ticket. And I forgot my password.
Reset your password.
I have to reset my password and really
go find the procedure to nominate an issue, right? Like that would be the first thing that I would do. Like, I don't know how to do that.
And really, what's the easiest path right there? It's just to not report the issue, right? So it happens all the time. And, back in my GRC days, when I was with a GRC company, I had 3 or 4 or 5 customers that I know of, that they all established this best practice of actually designating somebody as a risk captain and having weekly meetings so that the person could write down everything that everybody said is potentially an issue, right? Issues that they're finding are problems that they're finding. And that risk captain would be responsible for logging all this in. It works. It's a lot of overhead, but it works. But wouldn't it be great, let me get my phone here, but wouldn't it be great if I could just log on to Teams and just chat with Krista and say, hey, I see that there's a spill, and it would know that that's a physical plant issue and send it to the right spot. Or say, hey, I think that there's something shady going on over here, and know that that's a different type of issue and go over here. Or hey, the physical security of this door, the door's been open for 3 days, or I keep seeing people piggybacking into the facility, and have Krista understand the context of what's going on and log the issue the right way, and not have to worry about all those things that cause friction, whether it's making the risk meeting or, remembering what my password is and remembering how to navigate the software to get to where it is I'm going. So, when we look at things, where to start, look for those things. Where's high friction? Where are things you're doing over and over and over and over again? And just where, if you had to go hire 19 people because, which you're never going to get the budget for ever, right? If you're never going to get the budget for it, but you had the magic wand, let Krista be your magic wand.
Hey, Sam, what about the example, obviously, allowing automation to orchestrate and make sure a process is followed?
Mm-hmm.
What about the example of, what do people do now if they don't know a process or a policy around identifying incidents? What are they doing? They're probably pinging their IT administrator or maybe their risk manager, or maybe they're even their CISO, which is taking away from their daily tasks and saying, hey, what do I do with this?
Mm-hmm.
And then that person has to respond. What if you had the ability just to, directly respond to the automation platform like Krista and say, hey, what is our policy around event management? And Krista says, here, report your events to here, and then here's the official policy. And you don't take another human away from their daily operations. That's a very quick example of, some quick wins that organizations can get started with.
Yeah, not knowing how to do something or making something harder than it needs to manifests itself in so many different ways as problems, whether it's bugging somebody else or just ignoring it, not doing anything because that's the easiest path. I mean, there's probably other ways too, but none of those are the right answer.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of y'all's answers really focus, and from my perspective, around time. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what am I doing over and over and over? What takes a long time to do? Where do I find this information? Like copy paste from documentation to a SIG. You guys are just talking about hours and hours and hours. And if you get started, obviously you can save a lot of time. What do you think the risk management professionals, hopefully, they implement something like this and they realize all this time has been, it hasn't been created, right? But I'm not spending as much time doing those tedious and menial tasks for documentation purposes. What will they do with the time that they have left? Like what? So they've got more hours available. What are they going to do now?
The fun stuff. Right?
Exactly. They're doing
actual fun stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So this goes back to my experience as a risk consulting manager at one of the big four firms, and what people really go into risk management for is not to complete assessments, it's to understand and analyze risk and also develop ways for the business to treat risk, so risk remediation and mitigation. That is really why people get into risk management. But often, as we've discussed here and everyone's familiar, their day is bogged down by just, completing assessments and copy and paste and completing, swivel chair exercises. So let's let the advanced tooling that we progressed with since, Sam and I were both at the last Shared Assessments Conference in 2019. Let's let that tooling take some of those those tedious tasks, and then we can actually be risk managers, meaning managing risk.
Yeah, I mean, remember what risk is, right? It's the uncertainty around the ability to complete your objective, and your company has objectives, right? Risk isn't always, something that you're going to hurt yourself, and a lot of times people will take on more risk on purpose, right? You start a new product, you buy another company, you do something else, right? It's a risk, and there is risk in there, and you want to take it. You just need to get rid of the uncertainty to achieve those objectives. And that way, higher risk is higher reward, right? It's not higher uncertainty is higher reward. So what we're trying to do is enable risk managers to take more risk. And this enables you to do that. And that actually becomes super exciting. And Scott, you remember you and I, we did a webinar on our union podcast, where we talked about the Sasquatch and all that paperwork that they were chasing you with.
The Sasquatch that the AI generated a Yeti. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Mm-hmm. Right. It's we brought that out right after the OCC, or the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, consolidated regulations with a couple other financial services regulators. And the point I'm making is, I quoted this Federal Reserve examiner named Tony Da Silva that was in there, and he had said, what I see at risk management and banks is quite a bunch of inexperienced people that are trying to do a good job, but aren't, because they don't have the experience to do it. And they don't have the experience to do it because their job, what Jason had described before, swivel, copy, paste, control F, and let me go through 10 different documents to find what it is I'm looking for, is incredibly boring. And it is nothing, you can't say anything great about it. It's incredibly boring, and people find more exciting work to do. When you let something like AI or something like Krista take care of that really boring work, all that's left is the exciting stuff. And that's it, where you get to imagine how you can take more risk or manage the risk that's to any of those processes. And instead of being the person who says no, you get to be the hero that says yes. Find that creative way to do it. Find the creative way to take smarter, better risks. And it's really going to be exciting. Krista's going to open up that industry and make it a much more exciting place to be.
Well, I hope so. Jason, so let's sum it up. Do you have any closing thoughts on the summit, and maybe suggestion on what people can do today?
Yeah, I mean, to Sam's point, the last line he just said, I might go back to industry and start using Krista, actually focus on some fun stuff. Why we all studied risk management. But
are you saying sales isn't fun?
Business development, it's all no, but overall, it's a super exciting time to be in the industry. And again, I hope everyone just looks at us as a resource. We all came to Krista, including Sam and myself, because we truly understand the business problems, and speaking direct language of our risk and third-party focused friends that we've been in their shoes. It is a real solution. And, going back to the point with regards to the feedback of, how do we make AI real? How do we start to use advanced automation for our direct use cases and pain points? The time is now. It's here to stay. And Krista is one of those solutions. With regards to, I think you asked about, overall benefits or ROI. I do want to lead with one example. So we're working with a large advisory services firm focused on ESG as well as cybersecurity, just really across the, risk management, fields for their clients on a global perspective. And a very real ROI example is they budget 40 hours for their first or second level associate to go through their custom assessments, which is based off different frameworks and standards that we're all familiar with. So they budget 40 hours for that first or second level associate to go through that and, fill out the assessment per the vendor's documentation or the internal business's documentation. With Krista, we're testing and it is absolutely live at this point. We're doing that first or second level pass within 15 minutes and then providing their managers, where should they start to pay attention to? Meaning, hey, where are areas that there either was exceptions or nonconformities, which is one. Number two, if there's wasn't sufficient evidence to answer the question. And then number three is where's, again, going back to, being able to trust and transparency around AI is where was the, Krista herself not confident in the answer. So that's where the risk or the manager from this advisory firm can start to pay their attention to. And we can all extrapolate that. That's one client. If we extrapolate that to, multiple clients and multiple assessments, we can start to really see just a quick example of ROI. But other than that, just excited to continue the conversations with regards to the context that we made directly. And again, people from our past. So I think, Scott, you'll share how they can reach out to me. But Sam, do you want to share any last comments?
Yeah, I think that a lot of people aren't sure where to get started with AI. And it's kind of nice. I mean, we've already got some demonstrable, solutions that we can very quickly bring into your risk management program in just literally weeks, right? Very, very short period of time. But that's where the fun starts, right? Is after that, because with so many of our customers, They go in thinking, oh, I can solve assessments, or maybe I can solve this KYC thing or the contract piece. But from there, when they realize what Krista can do, there's always this, hey, what's the art of what's possible conversation? What can we do that we could never have done before? And Krista likely can help enable that because of the speed and the accuracy and the transparency. People after a very short period of time will trust Krista, or let Krista earn the trust of being able to do things that they thought were never possible before, so that they can actually focus on. I want to make this point very blunt. You're not going to lose your job because of this. You're going to be able to do your job much, much, much better because of something like this. And the art of what's possible is really going to be an exciting conversation, whether it's 3 months or 6 months or 9 months after you start with Krista. I think that's probably the biggest takeaway right there. Expect that light bulb to go off, and you're going to just really ramp up your organization.
Yeah, it's super helpful, Sam. It's like seeing a menu versus going to the grocery store, right? If you understand, like, okay, these are my possibilities, you're like, hey, that sounds interesting. Let me try that. Whether it's populating the SIGs, the continuous monitoring of issues and findings, and any kind of process automation, and the contract review process, and looking at the differences is super, super helpful. So if you're interested in any of those menu items, please visit us at Krista.ai. And we actually have a page available at Krista.ai/summit. And it has all the risk management resources that we delivered at the summit, past podcasts, past papers that we've written on risk management, and lots of articles. And also a link to Sam's LinkedIn profile. So if you want to connect with Sam, ask him a question, please do so. But Jason, Sam, thanks so much for reviewing the summit. And it was super fascinating. And I hope we can help a lot of risk management professionals create some time.
Thanks for doing this, Scott.
Great one. Thank you, Scott.
All right, bye.